most businesses, or I should say many businesses, tend to have more liabilities post-COVID as opposed than they used to have pre-COVID, not just because they've experienced a decrease in revenues, but also because the businesses are now required to comply with a bunch of COVID-related legislation and governmental orders and so on. And they also need to deal with certain liabilities arising from changes to the business relating to COVID. For instance, loans, PPP loans that they had to take, or actions with respect to employees and so on. So sellers will find that it's now crucial for buyers to consider whether an asset deal is preferable to avoid assuming specific COVID related liabilities.
Yeah. And it's interesting, a survey taken during COVID, 69% of public company board members stated that valuations were the biggest challenge to pursuing an M&A transaction during COVID. And 61% said that assumptions and projections were a big challenge. The next highest challenge at 24% was financing. So clearly, valuation and the assumptions and projections that go into valuation are crucial. And question becomes, in a COVID environment, are traditional valuation methodologies such as earnings or revenue multiples, discounted cash flows appropriate? And for strong targets, yes, they are. For targets that have turned the corner, they probably still are, but it's probably necessary to ignore or adjust uh, for the pre-turning the corner period. And for weak targets, it still not may not be a very good valuation.
And this goes back to what Nir was just speaking about earlier. I think a lot of us thought at the beginning of the pandemic that the reps and warranties were going to become a lot more buyer friendly because buyers would not be able to do the amount of due diligence that they deemed necessary on the business to the extent that they thought was necessary. So they'd look for greater comfort in the reps and warranties, and the reps and warranties would be, therefore, as I said, become more buyer friendly and more fulsome. However, I think what we've seen in practice, and as Steve mentioned at the start, this is all kind of anecdotal, as there's no statistics at this point. But I think the friendliness of the reps themselves has pretty much stayed at the same level as they were prior to the pandemic. But there are more reps now given that are COVID specific. So these typically focus on the areas that you'd think that they would, based upon the news, what we've seen in the newspapers in terms of supply chain. So buyers want reps that suppliers have not breached their contracts, suppliers of the business, the target business, that suppliers have not gone bankrupt, fundamental things like that, and that suppliers have not initiated any sort of or declared a force majeure under their contracts.